Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, Creating a Unicorn, Product Management in Tech. My name is Dan Gardner, and I'm a member of the Career Programs team here in the Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is sponsored by Boston University Alumni Relations and is offered to our 326,000 alumni all around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. It's important that we get your opinion on how we're doing, so we very much look forward to receiving your feedback via a survey that will be emailed to you later today. I know we have alumni joining us today from places like Russia, London, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Islamabad, Pakistan, Arcadia, California, Madison, Wisconsin, Rockville, Maryland, Gainesville, Florida, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Allston, Holliston, Newton, Taunton, Acton, Weston, and more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program we offer, and we're so glad that you're here. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. So if you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, please contact Adobe Connect at 1-800-422-3623. Again, that's 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website found at www.bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A chat box you see located below the slides. We hope to get to as many questions as we can during today's webinar. So go ahead and submit them as they come up during the presentation. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Presenting from Needham, Massachusetts, is Questrom School of Business alumna Lauren Fragoza. Lauren is a product manager on TripAdvisor's fast-paced hotel shopping experience team, where she grows revenue by studying the hotel shopping process and optimizing it to help users easily find and book the perfect hotel. Lauren is excited about user experience research, using data to uncover new opportunities, and working on features for mobile platforms as well. Most recently, Lauren launched a redesigned version of the hotel pages on TripAdvisor's mobile website and their apps, leading to gains in key usability metrics and a 20% increase in app revenue. Lauren is also passionate about education, running, and travel. She's advising the board members of the Wiley Network, which supports youth without permanent families through college as they create their business plan, and she's training for long-distance hikes in Scotland and Peru. Lauren, thank you so much for being here today, and I'm happy to say the floor is all yours.
Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. As Dan said, my name is Lauren, and the webinar I'll be presenting for you today is called Creating a Unicorn, Product Management in Tech. So I'm going to be discussing a whole bunch of aspects of product management, including what a product manager does, why that role is important for the company, and how you can become one. But first, I'm going to answer a question that I'm sure is weighing heavily on all of your minds. Unfortunately, there are no mythical creatures in my presentation today. In this context, a unicorn is a tech startup valued at over $1 billion. And there are a surprising number of companies in this group, many of which you might recognize, like Uber, Airbnb, or Spotify. So you can see on this map a sampling of some of these unicorn companies organized by country and valuation. And you're probably wondering how a startup can break into the ranks of these unicorn companies and how you can grow to compete in this marketplace. And so the answer to that question is having a good product strategy. And product strategy falls under the umbrella of product management. So what is product management? And I have a poll for the audience here because I would like to get some real-time feedback for kind of what your familiarity is with product management. So how many of you are familiar with product management? And the answer options are never heard of it, I've heard it talked about, but I'm not sure what it is, I'm pretty familiar with product management, or I'm a product manager. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to take the poll and to respond to that question.
And Lauren, as people are responding, one of my questions is, when you were studying at Questrom, did you know what product management was? Did you know that this was the field that you wanted to go into?
No, I did not. I knew that the four P's of marketing, one of them was product. And so I was aware that product was something that was an opportunity to someone concentrating in marketing like myself. But I didn't really understand what that meant. And I definitely didn't know what it meant in the tech space. Kind of associated it with like cereal or consumer packaged goods, stuff like that. And I hadn't realized that this was something that I could explore.
Great.
I'm happy to be giving a webinar to kind of introduce that to a bunch of people.
Absolutely.
So it looks like a lot of results are in, and it's pretty evenly split between people who are kind of familiar with it and very familiar with it. It looks like most of you are pretty familiar with product management. So that makes my job a little bit easier today. I do want to start with a definition of product management. This is something that's constantly in flux, and the product manager role is very different at different companies, and so there's not really a clear dictionary definition of what a product manager is. But one definition that I really like is the description of a product manager as the CEO of the product. So you're kind of managing your own little company within the larger business, and you're owning a product like maybe Spotify's personalized playlists or the onboarding flow that Airbnb uses for new hosts. And so it's your job to know that inside and out, to know exactly what your goal is, what metrics you should be monitoring and keeping track of, and to develop a roadmap for how you're going to improve that product and make it better and boost those metrics. And so you're working with all sorts of people across the company: designers, developers, analysts, salespeople, brand managers, anyone who is at all involved with the product that you're working on. And your job is to make sure that they're getting each piece that they're responsible for accomplished, that they're on board with everything that you plan to do, and getting them bought into the roadmap and the strategy that you've developed. And one thing that does separate a product manager from the CEO is that you have a role of influence and responsibility, but not authority. So you're not the engineer's boss, you're their partner. And there's kind of a twofold aspect to the job where you're a project manager and you're responsible for the schedule and the timeline and the metrics and reporting, but you're also a stakeholder manager where you have to make sure that everybody is on board with your ideas and following along. So now that you've gotten a little bit of background on what a product manager does, I want to give you some quick stats about the industry. So as you can see, product managers are well paid and have a lot of opportunities available to them. And these are jobs ranging from large enterprise software firms that have been industry leaders for decades to nimble startups operating in a co-working space that have only been around for a couple of months. The industry is pretty male-dominated right now, but hopefully that will start to even out as STEM opportunities become more accessible and MBA classes are more gender balanced. And most of the roles that we see are in tech hubs in urban areas like Boston, New York, Austin, Texas, Seattle, LA, and of course, Silicon Valley. But as Silicon Valley has become more popular and more crowded and more expensive to do business in, startups are starting to look elsewhere, and I think we'll start to see the geography of product management change over the next few years. So that was some quantitative data, some definitions and numbers around what product management is like. And now I want to take you through a qualitative example. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my personal experience as a product manager, how I got started, and what I actually do day to day. So I started in product management right out of school. I went to a career fair at the GSU in my senior year, and TripAdvisor was there. And at that time, they had a rotational program for people leaving college. So I joined up with that, and I had 6 roles at TripAdvisor over 2 years. 2 of them were in brand marketing, and 4 of them were in product management. And I really liked the product management roles, and I found that they resonated with me. And I really liked getting to think about the strategy of where the company was going, what decisions we were going to make, what we were going to focus on. And I also liked how that played out more tactically in my day-to-day role, where I was doing a lot of testing and launching new features. So really the bread and butter of my product management experience has been A/B testing or iterative testing. And this is a really critical process that we use to figure out if the new ideas that we're coming up with in support of our roadmap and in support of our product strategy are actually making the impact that we want them to make. And so we'll put together a rationale for the idea, we'll build it, and we'll put it out in front of real people, and then we'll monitor what happens between a test group and a control group, and then we'll evaluate those results and decide if we're headed in the right direction. So I'm going to take you through the product lifecycle, kind of what that looks like at each stage. The first step is product discovery. So this is where you come up with an idea for how you're going to improve your feature. And so you start with the strategic direction that you want to go in. So for example, I work on the hotels team at TripAdvisor, and we're always looking to make it easier for people to find the perfect hotel for them and then to book it. And so the kind of things that we would want to do are get people to engage more with features on the site, like photos and reviews and other types of content, and to get more revenue per user, to get them to book more hotels. So when we're thinking about what new ideas we want to test and what new features we want to add to the website, we would look at things like competitive analysis. So what are other travel companies doing? What do other places that sell hotels have on their website that we might be missing? And we'll also look at disparities in our data. So if we can see that people are getting 3 stages into a process, and then on step 4, all of a sudden they drop off, we want to really probe into that and figure out what's happening at this stage in our user flow that's making it difficult for people, and how can we attack that problem and sort it out so we can have 100% of people convert through the entire flow. And we'll also look at qualitative data. So we have people come into the office a lot, or we run user tests online, where we have people look at what our website and our apps look like right now, and we'll give them tasks to execute and see how they do. So if we have 6 people come into the office and 5 of them can't figure out how to enter their dates into the calendar, then we know we have an issue there, and we're going to have to focus on that to fix it. So once we've decided what pain point we're going to isolate, that's how we start to come up with ideas for a new test. And then we work with designers to design what that solution will look like. And so these are people who have a background in user experience and interaction design, and they take what we're thinking about and bring it to life and figure out the best way aesthetically and functionally for this improvement to the website to look like. And so we'll work with them to confirm what the change we're actually going to make.
And if you can just bear with us for one moment, I think we lost our presenter momentarily.
Sure, sorry, my Adobe
thank
just cut out all of a sudden. Sorry about that.
Oh, thank goodness. No, we're so glad you're back.
Okay, brief interlude. So yes, once we've worked with the designer to figure out this is like the physical product that we want to make, this is what it looks like, the product manager will write out a specification document, which is like a blueprint for all the different kinds of things that we're changing. So for example, if we wanted to come up with a new way of showing photo albums of all the photos that you can have of a hotel, I would write a blueprint that describes for the engineer and for other stakeholders for the project how you interact with each photo album, how you view more photos, maybe how you like a photo, how you add a new photo, and we'll go through each element so that we've kind of solved all the problems beforehand. Another big part of this is figuring out what success looks like for the thing that you want to test. And so this comes back to those metrics that you measure that are really key to your product success. So we might want to look at photo engagement or time on site, and we would set a goal for what we want to change, what we want that to look like at the end, so we can tell whether or not our test has been successful. Once we've gotten stakeholder buy-in, we've established what success looks like, we've written up this document, we'll bring that to the developers, and then it's their turn to take that over and to actually build the product so we can put it on the website. And I think something that comes up a lot when you talk about product management is whether or not product managers need to learn how to code. So I personally don't know how to code. I went to Questrom. I don't have any technical background. I have purely business background, but this is different at different companies. For example, Google is very tech driven and they want all of their product managers to have that technical experience. Other companies like TripAdvisor, like Amazon, don't feel as strongly about that. So whether or not you actually need to learn how to code or if it's only the developers that will be coding is really something that changes company to company. But it is important to have enough of an understanding of how the website works and what kinds of tasks your developer is going to have to do so that you can make their job easier. And where that really comes in is trade-off decisions so that you can build things more efficiently. And the goal is always to be able to build things quickly and build just enough that you can figure out whether or not your test is a success without maybe having to get things perfect and spectacular and go through a really long process of developing something maybe just so. And so a lot of this is back and forth with the engineer. We're figuring out the best way for them to build the feature and then checking it. So I'll go through and put my user hat on and think of what I might want to do as a regular person coming to the website. Look at the photos, read the reviews, check out the hotel. And as I'm going through those tasks, I'm always thinking, what can we do to make this better? And then I'll go back and forth with the engineer a few times, like, oh, when I clicked on this button, nothing happened. Or when I opened the photo album, it kind of popped out at me and I wasn't expecting that. How can we make that feel smoother? So you're always trying to think of how you can allow your user to have the best possible experience on the site and make it really easy for them to do what they came there to do. So once development is done and the product manager has tested the project and everything looks good, we put it out on the live website and actual TripAdvisor users will come and they'll see the test. And so we'll have 10 to 20% of people visiting the site seeing this new updated version and 10 to 20% seeing the old version. And then we look back at those key metrics that we've laid out that define success for the project, and we see what's going on with those metrics in the test and control groups. And so we leave the test live long enough to get statistical significance for the differences that we're seeing in those metrics. So we would really like to put our photo album test up and say 10% more people are looking at photos. They're spending 20% more time on the site once they've opened up the new photo album. And then we're getting 10% more revenue for each user that sees this test. And that's a really great result. Which leads to the final part, and this is where the unicorns are made. This is the unicorn factory, where we have to evaluate how the test did. And so if you have a really solid product strategy and you have a lot of great ideas and they're supported by a strong rationale, you're looking at the right metrics that move your product forward, that are making it better, you're going to have a lot of successes, and then you roll those successful tests out and those become the new control. And so the goal and why this is an iterative process is that you don't want to just say, oh, we had a great photo album test, this was awesome, now we have new photo albums, let's go on to something totally different. What you want to say is, okay, we figured this out, we know that this made it better. Maybe it was better because the photos were larger, they were higher quality. How can we get more higher quality images on the site? And so you're always using the things that you learned from the previous test and applying them to the next one. And so you're always growing and improving and developing and making your product better. And so that a project is not necessarily successful just because it improved the metrics that you're looking at. Maybe you didn't improve your metrics, but you saw something really weird. Like once we put the new photo albums out there, all of a sudden people started clicking a lot more on the reviews and we don't really know why. And so now you've learned that you don't know everything you thought you knew about your users, and you've got to go back and do some investigation, but that information is still really valuable. Or maybe your test was a failure. Maybe revenue went down, no one clicked on your feature, no one liked it, clearly you're doing something wrong. And this isn't necessarily bad. One thing that we say a lot in the office, I think this is actually a Facebook slogan, is fail fast. And so that means the goal isn't to only have good ideas. The goal is to have a lot of ideas and test them really quickly so that you are not investing too much time and effort into an idea that doesn't work, but you are trying it because you don't know what's going to work and what won't until you've tested it with real people and real users. And so you want to get as many of those tests out there, see what happens, learn from them, and move forward. And so the really important part to having a good product strategy and to executing tests well is to know when to launch a feature and also when to cut your losses and move on from an idea. So maybe photo albums are not the key to improving your product. You've got to look somewhere else, and you need to retire that and move on. And when you've put all this effort into the test process where you started out with this great rationale, you've shopped it around to all your stakeholders, everyone's bought in, that can be really hard. And it's very important to know, okay, we learned something from this, we learned it wasn't a great idea, now on to the next thing. So that's some insight into what I do for most of my day-to-day job and the way we approach improving our product at TripAdvisor. And so next, I hope you are all excited about product management and you're interested in becoming a PM. But even if you're not, that's okay. Maybe you're just here to learn more about a new industry. So I have another poll for you where I want to see kind of where you guys are at in your careers so I can focus this next part of the presentation. So how many of you are interested in a career in product management? And the answer options for you are, sounds cool, but not for me. It's different from what I'm doing right now, but I would like to get into it. It's a lot like what I'm doing right now, and I want to make a switch, or I'm already pursuing a career in product management. So again, I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to engage with that.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren. And we are getting a couple of questions that have come in already, so I'll take this opportunity to encourage folks, in addition to answering the poll question that Lauren has up on the screen now, please go ahead and submit questions as you think of them in the Q&A box below the slides, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so from the answers that have come in so far, it looks like about a third of you are already in product management, which is great. Nice to meet some friends. And half of you say that it's different from what you're doing now, but you are interested in getting into it. So that's what I think I'm going to focus on as we move to the next slide, keeping in mind that a lot of you might be coming in from a different career. So as I mentioned earlier, I did come into product management directly from undergrad, which is actually pretty rare. There aren't that many people that do that. A lot of people are career switchers. Many of them have a technical background, so they start out building it and they say, you know, I actually want to start to think about the strategy of this and not just get really into the nuts and bolts and build this new project, but I want to take a step back and I want to get to have a say in what product I build and where the company is going. There are also a lot of people who come in from project management roles or from consulting, and they'll either switch into the product management role directly or they'll come in through an MBA program. And usually when you're making that career transition, you're coming in at an associate PM or product manager level. As you start to move up through the ranks, you're doing more managing of other product managers. And so it can be difficult to break in because you have to manage people when you don't really have any experience in what they actually do for their role. So that's a little bit more difficult. But when you get all the way to the top of the ladder, there's an opening once again, and the CEO and founder role is something that pretty much anyone can become, because all you need to be an entrepreneur is a strong idea and a strong business plan to support it. So there are a lot of people who, you know, just have their idea, they come up with their startup and they launch it. Maybe they come out of an MBA program where they've gone to learn more about business fundamentals and to build a network, and now they're leaving with their MBA and their startup idea. Or there are people who will join another startup as a product manager, and then they'll learn on the ground there, and they'll see what the startup atmosphere is like, the kind of hats you have to wear as a PM in a small company. And after they get that hands-on experience, then they'll go and start their own company and use what they've learned there. So there are a couple of different ways to break into product management as an industry. And it's not uncommon at all for people to come in with very different backgrounds and then to use similar skills that kind of cross over to help make the case for that transition. So if you are interested in becoming a product manager, I've got some resources for you that you can take a look at next. These are books, articles, blog posts that I found really helpful, and they range from things that are a little bit more generic advice, just things to keep in mind as a product manager, how to be a better product manager, how to work with people and communicate, how to generate product ideas, and more detailed descriptions about what separates a good product from a bad product and what components make up a really great user experience that draw people into your product and help move your metrics. So hopefully, I think we can send these slides around, and you can copy this down, or they're all linked to the book or the article, and you can take a look at some of those if you're interested in learning more. Another thing that I would strongly recommend is, especially if you live in an urban area, there are definitely product meetup groups or networking circles that you can join, and you should take a look at what kind of events you can attend so you can start to make real life connections, meet some people face to face who are already doing this, and learn more about the kind of opportunities for product management there are right near you. And so if you are in the Boston area, there is an opportunity to do that that's coming up next weekend, with the second annual Questrom Women's Summit. I'll be in attendance. I'm going to be on a Women in STEM panel, and I'll be talking more about how you can pursue a career in the tech industry. So if you're in Boston and you're interested, definitely check it out. Registration is still open. And if you're not in Boston and you'd like to talk more to me after the panel, I'd be happy to hear from you and to answer questions. This is my contact information. You can reach out to me on email, through Twitter, or through Medium. And with that, I will turn it over to you. And I'd love to answer some of the questions that you guys have been putting into the question box.
Awesome. We certainly have been getting a number of questions so far, and I'd encourage folks to continue entering their questions in the Q&A box below, below the slides. One of the first ones that we had come in is going back to the product life cycle. What's the role of the product manager during the discovery step? Can you talk a little bit about that during that overall cycle? But what are you doing when it comes to that discovery phase of the life cycle?
So this discovery phase is a lot of research for the product manager. We're going to be looking at other websites. So I'll go to Booking.com or Trivago or Yelp, other review sites that are similar to TripAdvisor. Or sometimes I'll even stray really far from the product space and look at other big budget items that people only buy infrequently, like furniture or appliances or jewelry. And you start to look at how is this product merchandised in other places? What ways of reaching out to the user, of drawing them in, are these other websites using, and how might TripAdvisor use that? How can I apply some things that I'm seeing elsewhere to improve the metrics that I'm looking at? Another thing that I might do is pull data. So if I know that if we had user testing going on and a couple of people raised questions about our photo experience, I might want to validate that by looking at a larger sample size. And so I can pull engagement metrics and say, okay, what % of people click on the photos? Of those people, do they monetize more or less well than the average user? And I can start to dig into that and look for things that don't really look quite right. Like so we know photos are very important to people when they're comparing hotels, but for some reason, the people that click on the photos actually are less likely to book a hotel. Like, that's not right. And so we'll start to dig into that a little bit more. So your role there is really, as a researcher, to probe things that seem unusual to you and to try and look for opportunities that you can take advantage of to improve your product.
Great. And actually, another question right along these lines. One of our participants would like to know, out of these 4 stages, where do you find yourself spending the most time? Which of these 4, discover, design, develop, and deploy, takes up most of your time? And out of curiosity, what's a general timeline look like? Can this be done over a number of months? Is it typically, do you talk in weeks, or could it be as long as a year? Things along.
Okay. So this is very different depending on what kind of thing you work on. For me personally, I spend most of my time in the design and development phases. And the things that are the biggest bottlenecks in this process are writing out that spec and then getting buy-in from all the stakeholders. And so a lot of people will bring things up that are relevant to their goals or the part of the product that they own that intersects with what you're doing that you might not have realized. And so then you might have to go back to the drawing board and rethink some of what you've done so that you aren't hurting the goals that they're trying to achieve. And then the development process can take quite some time depending on what you want to change, because we want to be really careful with the things that we put out to real users. So all of this stuff is going to end up being live on the site, and that might be the only experience that person has with TripAdvisor for a couple of months. And so we don't want to put something out that has some glaring issue in it, and they're like, oh, I can't even use this button. I don't know what this is supposed to do. This website is horrible. So you really have to put a lot of time and care and attention into that development phase and making sure that everything works as expected. Those 2 are the thing that really affect the timeline the most. So sometimes I'll work on projects that are pretty small and there aren't that many stakeholders. It's really an isolated part of the website. Everyone on my team that I work with agrees with what we should be doing. We've got a lot of data to back up what our test idea is, and it's not a very big change at all. And so that can go through in a week. I actually had a project that I'm testing in a couple of weeks that it took us less than a day to agree what we wanted to do, build it, and have it ready for me to take a look at. But there are other things that are much larger and might affect significant portions of the company. So the pages that I work on There are similar pages for attractions, for restaurants, so not just for hotels. And so if I'm changing something about the way users navigate the page or where they might expect to see an important element, there are other people who are doing that and thinking about it from a different approach and coming at it from a different direction. And so I need to make sure that we all agree how that page should look in general, that it works for them and what they're doing. If we're changing a lot of different elements on the page, that means there's a lot of extra time and care that has to go into testing it. So that can take a couple of months. Or for a really big project that affects the whole website, it could be 6 months. At TripAdvisor, we try and test really quickly. And so these timelines are usually pretty accelerated. The average test, I would say it's probably a month from developing the idea, writing the spec, getting it built, and having it out live on the site. But if you work at a larger company, especially some of the enterprise software companies that have releases every 3 months, 6 months, a year, you might be working on just one project for an entire year and have like hundreds of people contributing to that. So it really depends what the culture at your company is around testing and what kind of product you work on.
All right, great. And we have another question. After the deployment, do you typically advertise the changes that have been made, or do you let people find those changes organically? If you do advertise, what types of advertising do you do?
So we always let people find the changes organically because we don't want to have them expect something to be there that then isn't there later if the test turns out not to do well for most people. And it's also just easier for us since we probably have 100 tests running at once from different groups and different teams on the site. And so it would be really hard for us to effectively communicate to our users all the different kinds of things that are changing and whether or not those things are going to be changed permanently. So we mostly will just monitor what people do naturally, and we don't want to impact their normal behavior either. So if we added a new photo album product to the site and then we told everybody about it and they all came and used it, it would look like photo engagement was amazing in that test space and really sad in the control. But really it's because we told everyone there was a new feature, so they came to check it out. But if they were just going about their normal trip planning process, they wouldn't have really been that interested in it. So we want to just kind of go under the radar and make it seem like there's no difference and just let people do what they would normally do. You'd also be surprised at how little people notice when you change things, even pretty dramatically. So when Facebook, for example, runs tests, there's a lot of uproar around, oh, my timeline changed, or like this doesn't look right anymore, and people get really upset. But a lot of the sites that you use every day have a ton of small changes that are happening all the time, and you just aren't paying super close attention, and you don't have the two versions side by side to realize what's different. And so a lot of times you can change things substantially without really having to tell anyone and just sit back and watch what they do. There was a second part to that question. Sorry, did that answer it?
No, I think that was great. I do have a similar follow-up question, though. Are tests mostly lined around refining those existing functionalities or rolling out new features? Maybe if you can just speak to your personal experience, or if you have a sense of those 100 different tests that are going on at any one time, if you can kind of approach it from either direction, I think that would be great.
So we try and focus on both of those at once, and we usually have some things that each team will own that are larger project ideas. So for example, we just did a pretty substantial redesign of a lot of our main pages, and that was across hotels, attractions, restaurants, the group that handles kind of the whole site look and feel. So we had a whole bunch of teams that were working on a timeline of a few months and all kind of paying attention to this one larger project. And that the goal there wasn't to make an incremental improvement, but to really make substantial changes in certain metrics that we were focusing on around the way users experience the site. And so we had weekly user tests where we were bringing people in and having them go through the new pages and assess it on certain dimensions. So like everything seems like it's where it's supposed to be. I really like this site. I can find all the information I need. I think the pricing is really good, those kinds of things. And so we're measuring it on those metrics. And it was meant to be changing a bunch of things at once and really holistic and not like an itemized kind of tweak it test. And then we also have a lot of tests running simultaneously just throughout the year that are much smaller and probably the kind of things that the average person wouldn't notice at all if they went on the site. And so we want to have a good mix of that because we don't want to just be constantly changing things in huge significant ways. And we don't want to wait until we have a whole bunch of things that we want to change and test them all at once. And part of that is just because we don't want to wait that long. Like, we want to be getting whatever benefit there is from improving it as soon as we can. And it also makes it difficult for us to look at our test metrics and evaluate the changes when we changed a bunch of things at once. And so we really want the test and control groups to be as similar as possible, so that we know, okay, if we made more money or if we saw more engagement with the test, it's because of this thing we changed. And when you change 10 things at once and they're all there on the page, and then the test doesn't do well, it's really hard to say, okay, well, if we just changed 6 of these and left that last one alone, this would be great. Then you kind of have to go back and figure out, like, what thing did we do wrong, or like, what's the combination of these things that's not working, and that can be difficult. But we also don't want to only do really small tests on, like, to tie ourselves to things that we already have. Like, we don't want to end up maintaining the status quo because we just are afraid to make big changes. So usually we try and balance that and have some strategies that are more long-term and bigger, and other strategies that are smaller and just focused on, quick tests to try and make incremental improvements.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much. We have a couple questions that fall into the hiring category. So Francis asks, what are the top traits that hiring managers look for when hiring a product manager? And then Stephen asks, I'm currently a software engineer. What are the steps I should take before applying to a PM position? Is this development background enough? Or would you recommend someone in Stephen's shoes get additional experience? So the traits that hiring managers are looking for, and for someone who's currently a software engineer looking to transition into the PM field.
So the traits that hiring managers are looking for, definitely communication skills. The majority of your job is going to be either convincing people of an idea, checking in with them on a project, following up, communicating results, analyzing something, and then having to convey that analysis in a bunch of different ways to different audiences. And so it's really important to be able to talk to a lot of different groups of people and be understood clearly and well. And also to have a good sense of communication timing and to know when to follow up and make sure everyone realizes that their concerns are being heard, that you're on top of certain things and stuff like that. So that's key. Also, being able to manage your own time well and keep a lot of different projects moving forward simultaneously when you have a lot of demands on your time. So there will always be people who want to meet about their pet project that maybe doesn't have that much to do with yours, or there's a lot of different things that you could focus on. But there are so many different things we could change on the site that would probably improve our goals. And so it's important to be able to make trade-offs and to understand what you want to focus on, but then also know that you're probably going to be working on 4 or 5 projects at once. And so how do you make sure that nothing gets left behind? So you really want to be focused on time management and communication skills to be a product manager. If you have a development background and you want to transition into product management, that really depends on the company. If you want to do it within your own company, then it's quite possible that you have a manager or someone in HR who's willing to let you maybe take on some product roles or like a small project of your own to product manage, and to get that experience there internally. And then you can kind of grow from that point and see if you can transition in a really organic way. For a more extreme example, maybe you just don't have the background in business strategy or the understanding of some marketing fundamentals or how the business works, and you really just need to take some time out, go get an MBA and figure that out, and kind of like combine your technical background with a solid foundation in business. And so I would say that you should be feeling out which of those kind of paths you want to take based on the positions that interest you and what you're looking at. So if you're looking at roles that are meant for someone with a lot of technical experience, then you probably don't need to go and get an MBA to be able to transition your career. But if you do want to move into a strategy role and eventually you want to kind of move up this product management ladder and become a senior VP of product, you're definitely going to have to know a lot about the financial side of the business, how money is made, how the strategy works, what your competitors are doing, what the marketplace looks like. And when you have those kind of questions being asked of you and strategic things that you have to come up with and support and develop, it's much more important to have that foundation in business as well.
Great. And one of the things that you mentioned was, you've made that transition from the brand marketing side into product management. Stephanie asks, how important is the marketing experience in making a good PM? And do you feel like you spend more of your time on product development or product marketing?
So I think that again depends a lot on the company. I personally, since I was in the rotational program, it was expected that I might be going straight into a product management role. So I didn't really have to defend my transition or make a case for myself. They kind of looked at my background within the rotational program holistically and said, okay, like you've got some marketing experience, that's great, but you also have a lot of project experience. Like we're not concerned with you transitioning into this role. For someone who's doing exclusively marketing, you might have to do a little bit more transition phase and take on some new projects. I spend most of my time in product development, but that also is something that's very specific to how TripAdvisor does business. And I think also how B2C companies do business in general. For more B2B companies, there's a lot of client management, figuring out how to explain the changes you've made in a sales pitch or in a sales deck. And you're working a lot more closely with the sales team to market and communicate the improvements that you're making on your product. And so people in those kind of situations would probably be focusing more 50-50 on product marketing and product management. If you're interested in product management, but you also really like marketing and you aren't really sure if you want to make a full transition to a job that's going to require a lot more product development, their product marketing is its own job. And a lot of companies have a separate role for that, where you're really focused on working with the product managers, the developers, and the sales team to figure out how to best kind of package and pitch the changes that you've made and the improvements you've made to the product.
Awesome. We have another question here, one from Jess, who's asking a little bit more about that discovery phase. Do you find that you're working with a lot of other people when you're doing some of that research in the discovery phase and leading the effort, or is it more of a solo job and you just get feedback from other stakeholders?
So a lot of it is solo, but usually we'll also start the quarter off by having a group effort brainstorm where all of the product managers focusing on a certain part of the business will kind of do their own separate research and come up with some ideas and then all get together in a room and talk them out with each other. And the goal there is to not just, decide on whose individual idea is the best, but to combine things and to like build off of the things that other people have thought of so that you're coming up with a better set of ideas than any one of you could have had alone. So there is some group brainstorming involved in that. But for smaller projects and things that are just kind of, ideas that we're working on in the middle of the quarter, it would be mostly independent work. And a lot of it is like the research phase itself is kind of hard to do as a group when you're talking about coming up with a final idea. And I think this also comes in more in the design phase when you're bringing in a designer who you're articulating this concept. So you might say, okay, I've seen that people who engage with photos are more likely to book. How do we get more people to engage with photos? This is my kind of basic idea. And they're going to help you flesh it out. And so that's when a lot of the group dynamic and kind of brainstorming happens, when you bring in the designers and they start to think of it in a different way and really bring it to life.
Great. So a couple people have written in to ask if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide with your contact information. It sounds like folks might have more questions and would like to get in touch with you directly. But I do have another question here that's a little bit more big picture in thinking about that idea of the unicorn and these unicorns that are global companies. So we have a question: if a startup doesn't go global quickly, someone might come along and copy the idea. So what's the best way to go global fast? And I guess if you can speak specifically to the ways in which you feel product managers have a role to play in that development and growth model that these tech companies have really succeeded in implementing.
So in terms of taking your product global quickly versus perfecting it in one market before you want to go elsewhere, I would say that taking something global is a pretty difficult task. So a couple of years ago, when I first came onto the team that I'm on right now, we were focused on this hotel booking product where you could go through the full flow of booking a hotel on TripAdvisor. And that was something new that we hadn't done before. In the past, we just let you click a link and take you off to another site like booking.com or Hilton, and you would book the hotel there. And so our approach when we came up with that new product was to perfect it in first the United States and then other English-speaking markets, because it was so important to make sure that we were meeting expectations in different markets about purchase behavior and making sure that the words that we were using were accurate, the translations were accurate, that people felt safe entering their credit card information and payment information onto our site. We wanted to make sure that we weren't doing anything to compromise their trust by putting something out in a new market that just really wasn't ready for it. And there are a lot of things internationally that you might not expect that can have a big impact on how people use your product. So one small example of that is payment types. In the United States, you could probably just book your hotel on a credit card. In Brazil, a lot of people use cash transfer. In Germany, cash transfer and debit cards are also very popular. People are more skeptical of entering credit card information and also are less likely to have a credit card. And so those were things that we wouldn't have wanted to have to solve for when we were still trying to gain traction on the original product idea. So from my personal experience, I would say you don't want to expand too quickly if you don't have everything kind of under control. You're not putting your best foot forward in that new market, because there's no use in expanding if you're giving someone a product that's not thought through, that's not what they want, that's not usable for them. The second part of your question, sorry, was how product managers impact those unicorn companies and their product strategy. So this really depends on where you're at in your career. I'm more like entry-level to mid-level experience, and so a lot of my impact and the way that someone at that role in the company would impact the larger strategy would be through coming up with those ideas in the discovery phase, then advocating for them really strongly, and finding mentors and sponsors within the organization who kind of see things your way and value you and support you and are going to champion those ideas to a higher level. The thing that I really like about product management is that through data, you can have conversations that would be difficult to have if it was just everyone's ideas and ego in the room. And so there have been times where people who are at very high levels in the company didn't agree with the product strategy that I had, but because I had data to support the direction that I was going in, I could push back against that and pursue the strategy that I thought was more appropriate, and ultimately did increase revenue because you kind of democratize that discussion, because you can point to numbers that objectively say, okay, this is the direction we should go in. So you can have pretty significant impact on the strategy, even at a lower level product position. And the way that product managers in general are really influencing these companies is coming up with the idea of what do we build next, and how do we make it better. And so a lot of the grunt work, I guess, is done by developers, by designers who are doing the day-to-day tasks of putting this stuff together, but the decision of what do we build and like what should it look like and what is enough, the minimal viable product, like what is the smallest thing we can build that will prove whether or not this startup idea is a good one, that kind of stuff comes from the product manager. And there are a lot of really important decisions you make there about what features are important, what ways to move forward, and how to pivot as you learn about your product and how people react to it, that are really important and make or break whether or not your company is going to be successful.
One of the things that I love that you included in your presentation was that idea of fail fast. Can you talk about a moment, and as specific or as general as you need to be, when you encountered failure as you kind of transitioned from that marketing career into this product management career? Is there anything that stands out, a moment when you needed to fail fast and what you learned from the experience?
There was a situation where I was on a team that was working on a product that we really had hoped would be more successful than it was. This is kind of a negative example almost. So we put a lot of time, over a year of development and client negotiations and stuff like that, into trying to build this product up and really looking at every detail we possibly could to make it better, and couldn't figure out why it wasn't gaining traction with users. And ultimately, we did kind of have to let that go and say, okay, we're not giving people what they want, so why are we pushing so hard? We need to take a step back, look at our product from more of a zoomed out focus, and figure out where else we can start to put this effort and start to make changes so that we're really making use of all the product managers, developers, designers' time and ideas, instead of just focusing on this one thing that hasn't been working for quite a while. And so I think the lesson there is that you really need to let the data speak for itself. And that's how that situation that I brought up, fail fast, when your test just isn't doing well, you're not really sure what's going on, to try and separate yourself from the emotions of the situation. I think the sunk cost concept in economics really illustrates this well, where don't think about all of the effort and stuff that you've put into things in the past. You just got to focus on the future and think of it as a new situation with a clean slate. And you have to say, okay, like if I were to invest in this right now, pretending that I haven't done anything with this before, would I make that decision to keep doing this or not? And the point is to kind of gather that information quickly that will help you make that decision, and then be able to cut ties with things, even if they seemed like a good idea before, and just move forward as quickly as you can.
All right, thank you very much for that. We do have one more pretty specific question from Brianna. She asks, do you work with website product owners or do you task developers directly?
I'm not completely clear on what the website product owner would be. So the part of the product that I own is the hotels related pages. So we have lists of hotels, and then each one of those hotels has their own page that just has details about it. So like reviews, photos, prices of rooms, stuff like that. And so that's the thing that I own. And I'll talk to other people who own different parts of that. So some people work on sort algorithms for how we display the hotels in order, or they'll work on prices and how to figure out like what price from different hotel providers is coming in, and like which one's the best one and what one we should display, that kind of stuff. And so there are people that own different aspects of the product that overlap a lot with mine, and I'll talk directly with them. A lot of the liaising is done by the product manager, and the developers are really focused on writing code. And then the part where they would be kind of talking to other people and reaching out is when they want to be able to reuse code or work more efficiently. So if they know that another engineer has been working on the same part of the code base recently, they might talk to them. Or if they know that a different team is working on a similar feature, they might see what they can borrow from that. But a lot of the discussion across the company for people who own different parts of the product is handled by the product manager.
Great. And I think the questions are slowing down from the audience, but one of the things that I was curious about is just if you could speak a little bit to what the workplace culture is like at TripAdvisor. I think from an outsider's perspective, at least, I tend to lump all those, tech companies together, and there are certain connotations and things that come to mind where it's, really high stress, but then there are also kind of cool benefits to working in a really hip and forward-thinking, forward-moving company. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been with TripAdvisor specifically?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty par for the course for tech in that it's kind of a work hard, play hard environment. So there are a lot of demands on your time. One of the kind of mottos of the company is speed wins. And so the goal and what the CEO is really trying to do with that motto is to not stray too far from what it feels like to be at a startup. So the company is 17 years old. It's grown a lot. Even in the 5 years that I've been here, there have been a lot of new departments added and new focuses added. And so the goal is to not be slowed down by bureaucracy or by all the different departments and people you have to talk to, and to just try and move through that product life cycle as quickly as possible, and to always be thinking of the next idea and getting in front of people as quickly as you can. And so that can be very high stress at times, depending on how much revenue is at stake or how big the idea is, how quickly you need to move. But it usually kind of ebbs and flows, where you'll have, one quarter where you've got a huge project and the deadline is really tight, and, something comes up at the end and there's really high stress. But then the next quarter where the stuff you're working on is a little bit more routine. And so there is a balance in that way. And there also are a lot of those cool tech company benefits. So we have a campus and a new building out in Needham where we get free lunch every day, and it's got this like around the world theme. So we have different cuisine types from different companies. We're always working on that travel theme. So every floor also has a different continent. All the conference rooms are named after different countries. So there's always travel and the thought of travel and exploration going on. So I think it is, tech is a really unique industry in that you do get a lot of those cool perks, and you get the opportunity to do a lot of things at your company that you wouldn't otherwise get.
Awesome. Thank you. Are there any other things that you were hoping to share with us that you haven't gotten a chance? Any questions that you thought might be asked that haven't been addressed before we wrap things up here?
No, I actually was pleasantly surprised by how many people were familiar with product management, because I get a lot of confusion. A lot of people think that my job is going to hotels and testing them out and then writing about them on the website, which would be a super cool job. Unfortunately, there's no one that has that job, but it would be awesome. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you for all of your questions.
Yeah, well, thank you again. We really enjoyed the presentation. Lots of questions came in, so I think the audience certainly responded well. And again, Lauren has listed her contact information up there on the screen, so if you'd like to get in touch with a specific question, certainly go ahead and reach out. Thank you again for your presentation. Lauren, we appreciate your time and your perspective. The Alumni Association thanks you. And my thanks also go out to all of our guests for participating today. I specifically want to thank those of you who have donated to BU in the past. We couldn't put programs like this on without your support. We have another excellent webinar coming up at the end of the month on October 24th. BU Industry Insiders presents Lessons from the Runway, the Power of Dressing the Stars, where BU alumna Alex Nora Fashan will discuss her work for Tom Ford International at the intersection of fashion and film. So I would certainly encourage all of you to visit our website at www.bu.edu/alumni/events to see the full schedule of opportunities coming up. As always, if you or any BU alumni that you know would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar, or if you have a topic you'd like to showcase for the BU Alumni Association, please feel free to contact me at the Alumni Relations Office or by email at dangard, DANGARD, @bu.edu. Thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you have a great day or evening wherever you might be.